Greetings, everyone. Welcome to episode 1 of season 4 of Becoming Chiron, the key to unlocking healing and personal alchemy, with me, your hostess, Ursula Duffy. I am so excited to record this episode today, to be kicking off this season, and to be returning to the roots a little bit of the podcast. This season will be much more like it was in season 1, where I was doing more personal stories, personal sharing of the lived experience of astrology and my own Chiron placement, and a lot of the things that I feel are just really important to help make astrology more relatable and bring it down to earth, pun intended. So this season, if you haven't listened to anything up to this point, I was doing in the beginning of each episode what I call my astro weather checks. And then I would get into the podcast episode content or the Chiron content of the last 2 seasons. So based on feedback that I received from a couple of people when I requested it, the astro weather checks were easier to digest when they were separated out. So those moving forward would now be their own standalone episodes. They are going to be in the category of bonus episodes of the podcast, and the crux of what I'm sharing and the the real content for the actual podcast episode will be standalone. So moving forward with this season that is currently in effect, it's been in effect for a few months now. The last astro weather check I did was last week for the new moon solar eclipse that was on Monday, which we're still kind of coming off the energy of. And it's definitely infused into the topic for this season, but also especially for today, as this all right now for me personally definitely feels like a bit of a rebirth. So what we're going to do today is I will just cover where we're going, where we're moving into with this season, the guidance that I received from Spirit and Chiron when I prayed for, as I did before I even started this project, what to talk about and what to make this whole thing into. And they deliver, they always deliver. So we're fresh on the heels of a new Mercury cycle, which is why this is timed and why I'm recording this today. There's a lot of new energy. I'm really excited for a new Mercury cycle in particular, especially where it's happening in my own chart. So this season, the topic essentially is going to be the Plutonic process. And I'm going to read to you a poem that I wrote recently about all of that. I'm kind of going to actually start and go back in time a little bit to where this all really started. And we're going to look at my solar return chart for last year. And we'll see why Pluto is heavily influencing my own personal year, and why this has sort of come to the surface as the intention and the underlying theme for where we're headed with this season. And then the other guidance that I received, I kind of started asking Spirit back in January, since I saw the end in sight for season 3, since we were covering the zodiac signs and there's only so many. So we ended with Chiron through the signs earlier this year with Chiron and Pisces. So I knew that was coming, and I really wanted some idea of where we were headed with this season. So as usual, as anyone who's been listening from the beginning, I get a lot of intuitive hits and guidance from Spirit, and the answers for questions that I've asked in my dreams. So in January, I started asking. I was actually asking all of you first because I just wanted to see what you were wanting to hear, but Spirit had other plans. So I asked and I asked, and it took a little bit longer than it had before. I don't know what was going on. I don't know what things Chiron and everyone were weaving at that point, but we'll find out, I'm sure. But I woke up one morning and had the idea of just a couple words, 13 emotions, 13 feelings. So I woke up with that. I sat with it. I, journaled a little bit. I'm like, okay, so that's interesting, because I think really part of one, the Plutonic process, but also Chiron's medicine, is teaching us how to transform, well, with Pluto, transform and transmute But with Chiron, to learn how to feel things, especially things that don't go away to an extent, with the whole Chiron story and the paradox and that, and being the wounded healer and all of the things, um, praying for death because of a wound that the master healer could not heal himself, like that whole paradox. I feel like with our emotions in particular, we all always have an opportunity to, one, feel, which we're taught not to do. We're taught to repress. So that's one. And two, just to learn how to go through the process of the emotion and then come on the other side of it, acknowledging and looking at all parts of it, and then coming on the other side in the higher vibration. I think everything has multi-level vibrations, whether we're talking about a freaking piece of paper or an emotion. Like everything has a vibration, everything is energy. So when we feel something, it's important to feel all parts of it. So moving forward from today, I'm not sure about frequency, timing, topics. I'm just going to let this I'm going to go with the flow on this one. And each episode, we're going to do 13 as that was the guidance. And, that's just an awesome number anyway. And we'll just pick an emotion that I have feeling guided to share, and we'll talk about it. We'll define it. We'll break it down, and we'll go through the process of transmutation. And I think that that's going to be a really cool thing because, one, I have no idea what it's going to look like. And two, we all feel something at all points in our, like every second we're feeling something. Every second we're assimilating, we're processing, we're judging, we're just this whole human experience is all about our emotions. And to really learn how to dive into the water element, I think is really important. And that's also very, very prevalent in my solar return chart, which we'll get into next. And I just feel like it's been a huge thing for me too, as I shared in the first season. I was also taught, or maybe it was like a default, I don't know. I'm sure that there will be growth, personal growth through this process for me also, which is always my favorite part of this project. I was just, I repressed my feelings so much. I never wanted to show that I was upset. I never wanted to have people see me cry. It was just like my whole childhood was like that. And I'm the oldest child. So I always felt like I had to be the put together strong one. So for me, that whole process and learning how to feel my own emotions and show my own emotions and the explosion processes I've gone through as a result of the repression for so many years have been a very interesting experience. So that's where we're headed. Like I said, I'm very excited. I'm just making sure I check all my boxes here and things I wanted to share in this introductory episode. So yeah, waking dreams, 13 feelings, 13 emotions. I'm not quite sure what we'll be calling it each time, but whatever. It'll be each episode will be focused on a feeling or an emotion. And this is definitely all kind of under the umbrella of the Plutonic process. And we'll revisit the Chiron story every time. I feel like maybe I can kind of make some ties or relate it in some way, whatever the topic ends up being each time, to Chiron's story. So we'll definitely be pulling Chiron into it as always, as Chiron is the guide, the master, the the point of this whole project. So Chiron will be included, of course. So I shared in the first season my own natal chart. And as many of you know who've been with me, I have Chiron in the first house of my chart. We are coming up actually on 2 years of becoming Chiron. So we'll maybe do a little celebratory thing for that with this episode when I release it. As of April 30th, that was when I recorded the first episode, April 30th of 2022. So if you go back to season 1 and maybe listen to the first few episodes as a reminder or just to review the material that I shared a lot about my own natal chart. Chiron, the first house, I'm a Taurus rising. So I have Chiron at 17 degrees of Taurus, and my ascendant degree is 11 degrees of Taurus. So Chiron conjunct my ascendant, part of the whole thing, becoming Chiron, part of the whole thing, embodying the energy, figuring out my own, wounds and over embodiment and all of that. So that's all, the root of this whole project. And I also shared that my sun is 13 degrees Libra and I have Pluto at 21 degrees Libra. So it's close. It wouldn't be considered a conjunction by some, but I think it's close enough. And I know that it's close enough in my lived experience and being on the other side of my Pluto square and all things. So that is definitely the Pluto sun aspect is definitely going to be infused into this whole thing. And also the fact that I'm still really much in the thick of my Uranus opposition. I shared that in season one. It's been sort of a on an extra intense experience for me since Uranus has been going through my first house. So Uranus moved into the sign of Taurus in 2018, in the spring of 2018. And since that time, I have been on the path to becoming a professional astrologer and leaving the corporate world. And there's so many things that have just dramatically, surprisingly changed my life since that whole transit started. So it's been a early onset, quote unquote, midlife crisis for me, and also just a blessing, of course, because it's been a personal revolution and an extremely liberating experience. But Uranus has really, I think, only come close to opposition for me personally since before it went retrograde last year. So I haven't quite actually had my exact Uranus opposition yet. But Uranus has already gone over my ascendant. Uranus has already gone over my Chiron. Uranus is in the late degrees of Scorpio now. So, I mean, I'm sorry. I have Uranus in Scorpio. Uranus is in Taurus. So it's going through the 20 degrees now of Taurus. So becoming in exact opposition over the course of while we'll be doing this season. So I'm also excited to see what happens with that. So this is all real time, everyone. This is all, I'm sharing this as it's happening. So let's look at why this whole umbrella topic is the Plutonic process. So for anybody listening on a platform that doesn't have video, I'll do my best to explain what I'm showing on the screen. But if you're listening on a platform that only has audio, you can find this video episode on Spotify and Sea Goddess YouTube. So here we go into the solar return, and you'll see why this has been an extra year on top of an extra several years. So in a solar return chart, if you haven't worked with your solar return chart before, I think that it's extremely important to get a really good idea of the energy of your personal year ahead, the themes that you are heading into in the next personal year, birthday to birthday. I've been using them now for, I want to say 19, maybe 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, at least 5 years since I learned, essentially. And this is a very important tool, I feel, because there are many things that are not just the chart alone. There are some other things that work and play into this, and I'll cover those as well. But it's just a really cool, like it's your year's birth chart to an extent. Like you have your birth chart, that's set in stone essentially, but everything keeps moving and everything changes, and you're always in some kind of cycle moving forward. You're always in some kind of chapter or, piece of your lesson plan. So with your solar return, it gives you a really good idea of what you're heading into, personal growth, lessons, major overarching themes for your year ahead. So if you don't already work with this, I feel like this is a really important thing that you could add into your toolbox of self-awareness and just getting a feel for why things are happening, or if you need some validation over anything, like this is really a good underlying energy to work with. The key things with solar returns, You need an accurate birth chart, and they're also location based. So you need to know where you'll be at the moment of your exact solar return, which isn't always on your birthday. So I was born October 6th, 1980. My solar return in 2023 was October 7th. So it's when the sun comes back to the exact degree and minute from returns to when the exact same degree and minute of when you were born. So the sun is the most important thing in the solar return chart. All the other planets have generally the same meaning. The meaning's a little bit different. This reads a little differently than a natal chart does. And there's two other things that go along with solar returns. And there's two things that factor into what's called your annual perfection. So certain houses of your chart, of your natal chart, get activated every year of your life. And then you have a Time Lord of that activation. So I'll cover all that personally, and that'll make more sense once I go over it. But this was my solar return chart for October 7th of 2023. And I mean, if you've been with me for a while, you know that this project was started during a time of great transition. You know that the last several years of my life, 2021, moving forward when I left my corporate job, have been extreme transition, transformation, just learning how to live a whole different lifestyle and have a whole different life. And throughout the time, I've had some pretty challenging solar return charts, and I saw some, themes and things coming in the chart that I knew were going to, be part of my year. I haven't really had a very exciting and easy solar return chart in a while. And this one, I think, takes the cake as far as being one of the more challenging ones that I've worked with since I started working with them. When I pulled this up, I was like, you've got to be effing kidding me. But that's how it goes. I mean, this was my plan. So it's certainly, how many months has it been now? So I just had my half birthday, actually, which is another reason why I wanted to start this month. So 6 months later, I'm in the thick of this. I was really kind of a little bit in denial at first when I saw it and when I started seeing some things start to happen. And, we just roll with it. So when I saw this, especially the second house stellium. So for everybody listening and not seeing my screen, my solar return chart is a Virgo rising chart. And I have Mercury and the Sun and the South Node and Mars all in Libra in the second house. So Sun, like I said, is the most important thing in a solar return chart. Sun in the second pretty much means that my focus, it will be on independence in my resources, my personal resources, and also having more confidence. Like, this is a confidence building year for me. So those are the themes of the second house, your personal resources. So things like finances, possessions, that kind of thing. But it's lesser known that it's also very much related to your self-esteem and your self-confidence and your sense of self-worth. So all of those things have already come into play in a very big way. When I saw the South Node there, I was very concerned because South Node is a point of release. Mercury in a solar return chart relates to finances and those themes, and Mars is separation energy, but also drive. And all of those things have definitely been prevalent themes in my life since October. Dynamically changing income sources, things have, dried up in some areas, and I'm being not forced, I don't want to say forced, but catalyzed to be more creative and to seek out things that are a little bit more steady. As you know, the state of the world is a little, that's an understatement, challenging right now, finances wise. So we're all kind of being challenged in a way to kind of rely on ourselves, but also our multitude of talents and trying to figure out how to have earnings. I'm in a spot now where I'm being challenged to figure out how to have earnings, and I'm trying to do my best to stay on the course of astrology and aromatherapy. and not go back to the corporate world. So those challenges and things have absolutely come up. And with the Libra kind of flavoring the whole experience, it's just kind of really learning how to find balance in all this too. Like I, left my job. We started Sea Goddess in 2021, but went through some very dynamic changes in 2022. So things with the business have been just a rebirth after rebirth after rebirth. And we're kind of in that phase again now. So everything has just changed so much. And it's just been a little bit, it's been very challenging, to say the least. So I've been in this position now where I need to stand more on my own. And I'm doing that to the best of that I can, but that definitely involves, digging in and having more self-confidence with things and saying, like, knowing that I can do some of the things that we've been doing as a team on my own. So that has been a huge learning process and personal growth. Like, sun is always your light, your consciousness, and but you, like who you are at your core. So all of those things have come into play this year so far in the last 6 months. But to add icing to the cake, I have Pluto opposite the moon in my solar return chart, which is dramatic change, emotion. Moon, I have moon in Cancer. So everybody listening and not looking, moon in Cancer in the 11th house, and Pluto in Capricorn at the late degrees of Capricorn in the 5th. So whenever we have Pluto opposite the moon, that happens once a month. So we all experience that collectively pretty routinely. It's a hot minute. It doesn't last very long since the moon moves so quickly. But when we have this natally or in a chart that's kind of a more long game thing, like a solar return, it's chaotic, it's dramatic, it's definitely going down into the depths of the dark nights of the soul, and emotion definitely kind of in overdrive, and that this is all playing into what I'm talking about and where this season is going, especially with the moon being in Cancer. So I saw that, and then the extra also added thing that we have at this time of my solar return is we still had Pluto squaring the nodes. So I have Pluto and the moon squaring the nodal axis in my solar return chart. South node, like I said, in Libra, so that's at 25 degrees in the second house, and the north node is in Aries at 25 degrees in the 8th. So I have a huge, big, fat cardinal square in my solar return chart. So pretty much what that means energetically is dig deep. It's time to start something new. It's a threshold. It's an initiation. It's the energy of the change of the seasons, which we're in now. So there's a rebirth element that goes into it. And it's definitely a huge challenge. And the houses that are squaring each other, the cardinal houses in my solar return chart, so 2, 11, 8, and 5. 11 where the moon is, so this is more like, my underlying needs and feelings and things in this personal year ahead. Community, tribe, but also my own personal vision for my future, which has had to change this year. So that's the 11th house. So those themes are connected. And then 8th house, that's shared resources. That is the house of commonly known as sex, death, money, that kind of thing. So thankfully, the North Node is there. So there's energy kind of being infused into that space in my solar return chart, but that has definitely come into play as far as relying on shared resources when the release of the income in the second house has started happening. So as you all know, you've been listening to me for a while, I am married, so nest egg type stuff has come into play, unfortunately, but thankfully I did a lot of preparation work before I left my job. So, and then Chiron's there also at 17 degrees of Aries. So Chiron's always there somewhere. Chiron still was up opposite my sun at that point. So sun at 13, Chiron at 17. I started this whole project when Chiron was opposite my sun. Chiron's been kind of drifting in those late teen degrees of Aries for a while now. So, challenge to my own healing journey, to healing my own identity, like all of these things have come into play. And then, Pluto in the 5th, just the transformation in my creative works, my creative projects, where I find joy, all of that is there. And just a couple other things to note, like with Saturn being in the seventh, like the commitment in my partnership has been strong. Like thankfully, I'm so blessed in that area of my life. And then just to mention too, this is kind of fun and has come into play just recently. In this solar return chart, I have Jupiter in Taurus in the ninth house and Uranus in Taurus in the ninth house, 22 degrees for Uranus, 13 degrees for Jupiter, and the midheaven is in Gemini in the 10th. So I'm hopeful that I have some writing projects coming online. We shall see. And I will share something that I wrote, a poem that I wrote recently as well. So that's the solar return. That is the energy. My highest element, I always pay attention to the elemental balance in these charts as well. So air is the most. So having ideas, just like trying to be creative and do things differently and just seek other avenues and just pulling my creativity into how I navigate this whole chaotic journey, this whole rebirth journey, this whole transformation process has been key. Just being open to new ideas, asking for help from others, getting feedback from others, like all of that has been in play. And of course, the cardinal mode is the strongest, is the highest. And like I said, that's that initiation and just starting something new. So I wanted to start there. And then the other thing that I said underlying these charts, so you can look it up online. You can find one where it tells you you can look up an annual perfection chart. So I'm 43. When you turn 43, your eighth house is your activation for your annual perfection. So there goes that eighth house again. And for me in my natal chart, my eighth house is Sagittarius. I have the planet Neptune there. I've shared that in the first season. So eighth house shared resources again, totally activated for this year also. And then your time lord for your personal year is the ruler of the house that's activated. And from the ruler of Sagittarius is Jupiter. So Jupiter is my time lord for the whole year. And when you're working with these, just sort of pay attention to where it is in your natal chart, pay attention to where it is in your solar return chart, and then also where it is by transit. So I have Jupiter going through the first house of my chart. Jupiter's been in Taurus. Jupiter will shift into Gemini in May. So track that if you're working with your solar return, because that's very important as far as where you have the planet natally, but also where you have it going around the wheel of your natal chart by transit. So those are the three big things that go into solar returns. And I definitely wanted to share that as it's so relevant and prevalent in everything that we're moving forward into this year with becoming Chiron. The other thing that was extremely important that is a huge part of this whole thing this year is we had the second set of eclipses last year in October. And the first one was a total solar on the 14th of October, so very shortly after my birthday. And that was at 21 degrees of Libra on my Pluto. So whenever we have an eclipse that happens that hits a natal placement, a natal planet, asteroid, whatever node, it's a huge deal. And as I've shared in the several few episodes of the start in season one, you know that eclipses changed my life. So eclipses tend to change my life. And this last ones, the last two in October last year, did not disappoint. And the ones that just happened this year, the lunar that we had on March 25th, as well as the solar that we just had on Monday, did not disappoint. So I had a eclipse on my Pluto, right on my Pluto at 21. They're exact. It's actually a stronger, more important thing to pay attention to. So this even so with the Plutonic influence in my solar return chart, in my own natal chart with it so close to my sun, but then also having the eclipse on my natal Pluto at 21 degrees of Libra, I just knew that Pluto was going to be showing itself strongly this year. And I think I mentioned that in that episode. I'll put a couple links in the episode notes for this episode, but that total solar eclipse that we had on October 14th, I talked about the Pluto and Libra generation and what that eclipse might mean for you, since you probably have Pluto somewhere in that range. If you're a 1980, 81 baby, 82, maybe, depending. So very important to pay attention to. Maybe if you're listening to this now and you weren't sure what was going on, and if you're experiencing something similar, go back and check. You might have had that eclipse on your Pluto. So if this is speaking to you more deeply and you're sharing a similar experience to me, the eclipse on the Pluto was the catalyst for everything that's going on. Big deal when they happen on our natal planets. So that's where we're headed. That's really what I wanted to share as far as why, the reasons why, besides the dream and besides all the other things. And Pluto's doing this dance this year. So when Pluto shifted into Aquarius again for the second time this year on January 20th, which is about the time I woke up with that dream, which is interesting. The vibe this time around has been very different for me personally, probably for everybody, because the nodes have changed. So we're in like a little bit of a different landscape. Just to recap, last year between March and June, Pluto did its first dip into the sign of Aquarius out of Capricorn. And there was a lot of buzz around it then, but it didn't last very long. It was like a toe dip. Okay, the water's too cold, the water's too hot. I'm out of here. So then Pluto went back into the later degrees of Capricorn, like I shared where it was when in October when I had my solar return. And then in January this year, on January 20th, is it another dip. So Pluto is now, I think, around 1 or 2 degrees of Aquarius. And it's been there since January and will be there until September. Pluto will go back into Capricorn one more time between September and November, and then it'll dip back into Aquarius and secure itself. It will dive in this time for the next 20 years. So that is another reason why Pluto is a big part of this season, because of the dance it's doing. I think it's important to share that experience because we're all experiencing that new energy in a whole different way. And we've had a lot of firsts since Pluto went into Aquarius again this year. We've had a lot of the personal planets meet up with Pluto in Aquarius for the first time in any of our lifetimes. So there's a lot of things that have been infused into this new placement that have made this time around very different than last year's 3-month preview. So let's, where do I want to go next? I have half a page of notes still. I'll do that last. Y'all are part of the process right now. So let's do, I can't decide if I want to do the Oracle card share or I might read my poem first. I have the poem first on the list, so let's do that. So back in, I'll put a link to this also in the description. Back in February, our Sea Goddess Healing Arts soul broadcast topic was loving yourself through a dark night of the soul. As we were all feeling this very strongly in our own lives, personally, with the Pluto chaos, the rumbles, all of those things. So when I sat down to write my piece for February, it was in January, and I was really feeling this strongly in January. I was really just like in my own deep dark night of the soul moment that entire month. As you know, everything started, it was 2 months after my solar return, everything started kind of coming to the surface as far as the themes, but in a really big way. Lots of change all at once, and I was just in the thick of it and just really facing my own threshold initiation. I want to give up experience again, and it was really, really, really challenging. So the notes that I wrote when I was starting to think about how I was going to put into words loving yourself through a dark night of the soul were the underworld journey, diving into the depths of oneself, rebirth, meeting oneself on a deeper level when confronting a crossroads, and trees and the underneath. So throughout the month of January, I did my own deep dive using a oracle deck called the Night Side by Angel Quintana. And every day I pull a card, and this deck is meant to help you dive more deeply into your underneath, your underworld, your but more importantly, your unconscious. So I pulled a card every day. I did this for the entire month of January consistently. I think I only missed one day, which was pretty good. Pulled the card, did a journaling prompt, and then sat with it, because it's challenging to really intentionally go through the process of confronting your sub and unconscious self. But I knew from the solar return chart, and then also the other things that I mentioned, like that this, with the eclipse on the Pluto, that 2024 was going to be a very deep dive and a rebirth journey. So this poem kind of just came to me after I wrote those ideas down. I used to write a lot. I was actually published in my high school literary journal. I used to love to write poetry and essays and short stories, and have a whole blog archive on my Ursa Alchemy website, which I've linked to in some episodes before. So it came out as a poem. And this was the first poem that I wrote in a really long time. This was the first poetry contribution to any of our soul broadcasts for me personally. So it just felt really good, and it just flowed so easily. So I'm really excited to kind of get back into this type of writing. So that's why I wanted to share this today, because this was me going through the process back in January, was what came out. So the title for the poem is The Plutonic Process. So that's sort of morphed more deeply into, the theme for the podcast season and everything. So it's all interwoven and intertwined. So this is the poem that I wrote, and I want to read it to you all now. A dark pool's edge is a threshold, a crossroads. It's curious, mysterious, intimidating, unknown, and a little sexy. Echoes of soul are faint and inaudible. Experiencing them requires diving deeply. Diving deeply can be a choice, or sometimes life's push. It matters not the method by which the pool is entered. What matters is being inside, meeting oneself there, embracing oneself there, inside the imaginal realm, into the unknown depths, inside of one's subconscious, unconscious, the underneath, the roots of one's being. The journey within requires courage, grit, bravery, compassion, brutal honesty, patience, strength, and surrender. Breathing underwater for as long as it takes. Destructive forces pick at and peel away still attached scabs. Untouched layers revealing secrets deeply known yet still hidden. Discovered and cherished to become parts of the reconstruction. Oneself reassembled, marinating and congealing, resurfacing anew. Bolder, wiser, familiar yet unfamiliar, metamorphosed, purified, alchemized, dead, reborn. Remember, love, allow your new parts to dry before you fly. So that was my personal, again, another Plutonic process, another dark night of the soul experience. I don't know what part of that I'm still in just yet. But chrysalis, definitely the cocoon phase for sure, the resetting the imaginal cells, the chrysalis, the butterfly, like all the caterpillar butterfly experience is definitely very much a beautiful metaphor for the Plutonic process. So that's what I wrote, and that's what I wanted to share. And I hope that you all enjoyed that. Let me know. I'd love to hear. And then I'm going to share I was gifted this beautiful Oracle deck. Thank you, Beth, again. And it's called Star Codes Astro Oracle by Heather Roan Robbins. And the cards in this are really cool, and the descriptions are just kind of short and sweet. In the past couple seasons, I shared from the Black Moon Astrology Oracle, and I liked those because they were very thorough and the descriptions were long and kind of multifaceted. So the last two seasons were more teaching educational and just using different ways to teach. I like because it helps, it speaks to whoever has different methods of learning and processing information. So that deck was really good for seasons 2 and 3. This one, I don't know how far I'm going to go with it as far as relating it to the emotions. We'll see. But I wanted to share the Pluto card because I feel like it's really a good also summary of the Plutonic process, what the planet Pluto does and means and everything natally, but also by transit. So this is the card. If you can't see it, hop over to the video episode, but it's just pretty cool. It looks like I can't think of the name of these things, but it almost like the machines that have, it's almost like a time machine to an extent, where the discs circle around and they're in different directions, but they go around on their own axis, but also around the center axis. And it has the symbol for Pluto on it. It's card number 27. Pluto's in the center of the whole thing, of course, and the word on the card is rebirth. So here's what the book says for Pluto. Pluto is the modern ruler of Scorpio and is a powerful planetoid that takes 248 years to traverse the zodiac. Pluto and Chiron, the largest of its 5 moons, circle each other and create a binary system. Most myths connected to Pluto, god of the underworld, have 2 major characters. The one who descends into the underworld to return reborn, and the one who either sends souls down to the underworld or greets them on arrival. From Pluto and Prosperina to Seth and Osiris and Inanna and Eshregal, both sides of these myths, the use and abuse of power, and the willingness to be reborn again into their empowered divine self, describe Pluto's influence. Pluto was also lord of mining, retrieving valuables from deep within the earth. Action. Pluto calls for 3 actions. First, to dig deep. Second, to be willing to transform. And third, to use power wisely. Pluto calls you to drill down, dig up what is worthy, and bring it to the surface. Then rinse away the dirt and uncover the gold. Bring up riches whenever you dig deep into your soul's work. Notice obsessions and neuroses. These signs of stress must be listened to and healed, but don't allow them to control you. Pluto reminds you that you can't hold on to the past, but you can take care of yourself. To begin this work, you may have to let go of an old form, as a caterpillar must to become a butterfly. Mourn what you've left behind, then get curious about what is to arrive. Examine the power dynamics of this situation. Never give yours away, nor misuse your power over others. Step out of a power struggle and into self-empowerment. Challenge. Pluto's shadow side can bring up obsession, depression, mortality, and grief. Pluto plays hardball, so get a guide for this realm if needed. Spiritual gift. Pluto asks you in the face of life and death, why are you here? This isn't a rhetorical question. Strip down to the essentials and come back to what really matters to find the answer. And I'll tell you what, everyone. I think that this dream, this 13 emotions or feelings idea that was planted back in January, that was really important because I was struggling hard with the challenge. I was definitely in this space the whole month, really, of really, really, really kind of stewing a little bit in the in the shadow of the emotions and the power to an extent too, personally, to be honest. But along the way, being really self-aware, I think, is key. Knowing where this is happening in your own chart is really key because it gives you a lot of clues and it gives you a lot of assistance in being able to break the whole thing down and know where you're in the lower vibration, know where you're in the shadow, and learning how to transmute it and turning it into the light side and the personal growth and the things that come when you become the butterfly. So that seeding of the imaginal cells part, I think, is going to be a really key theme in every episode moving forward in this season with whatever we decide, whatever spirit decides to plant, to discuss, whatever emotions we dive more deeply into. So that was another key thing that I wanted to just include from a different perspective other than my own. Oracle decks are always helpful to me for that. And then just yesterday, actually, yeah, yesterday. So, as all of you know who've been listening for a while, I absolutely adore and love Louise Hay and her work. And I gift myself every year her I Can Do It calendar, her daily affirmation calendar. And um, uh, the messages always speak so deeply to me for every day. So I've decided on a few things to start with this new Mercury cycle on the other side of the eclipse with the now waxing moon in Gemini. And this was the message for yesterday, which was really cool because the new Mercury cycle actually started around 7 p.m. last night. So for the Kazemi day, the transition day, the message for yesterday with a rainbow, which we've been seeing quite a bit of here lately with all the rain and the wild, spring weather with April and everything. The rainbow has been kind of an underlying theme also, which I think we'll touch on at some point. But I've been seeing a lot of really people's cool experiences with rainbows recently. And we saw a double one last week here in Atlantic City, which was cool. I let go of all resistance and expectations with respect to my career. People are searching for exactly what I have to offer. We are drawn together naturally. So that is going up on the board and that'll be up there for a while. That's the intention with starting this when I did my election astrologically and everything. I'm just trusting this so deeply at this point. And I just know that this podcast and everything will reach the people that it's supposed to reach. And if it doesn't vibe with you, that's cool too. I'm not for everyone. I know that. So that trust is there in this space in my chart. This is all this Aries energy and all these things are in my 12th house. So this is just a space of focus for me. It has been for a little while now, and that's the cardinal point right now. So 12th house is a lot of things, but one thing is just being able to reach the people that you're meant to reach. So that's what I'm trusting with all of this. That's why we're starting today and all of the things that I've already shared. So we'll end for today here. I didn't mention when I hit record, but it was probably a little after 8:30. So we're about 40 minutes in, I guess, at this point. So that's pretty good for an intro episode. And like I said, I don't know when I'll be back with the next one. We'll see. We'll see what emotion wants to reveal itself and want to be picked apart. But I will be back with another astro weather check for the Scorpio full moon on the 23rd. So I'll record that probably around the 21st-ish, maybe around the 20th, since that's the day of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which is a huge deal. So we'll do the astro weather check then, and I'll dive into the astrology of the second part of the month. At that point, we're in a bit of a lull now in this very mid part of April. It's quiet, thankfully, for at least this week before we get going, and again with that conjunction next weekend. So we'll stop there for today. Thank you all for being here with me. If you've been with me for all 3 seasons, I'm so grateful. Thank you. As always, feedback is always appreciated. Welcome, stars and reviews, always, 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 especially now that we're upon the anniversary of year 2. Stars and reviews on whatever podcast platform allows them. I know Apple Podcasts does. If you're listening, or if your favorite way to tune in is on a different platform, just likes, shares, comments on our YouTube will be great. I appreciate all of that. And I still have the paid subscriber option to support me financially, especially through my own deep financial transition time right now. It's just $8.99 a month, and that would help me tremendously to keep the project going. And yeah, that's where we're at, everyone. So thank you so much. And if you want to reach out to me directly for a reading or anything, ursaalchemy@gmail.com. seagoddesshealingarts.com/ursaalchemy is my page, and where you can find all of my services. I'll be back in person at the Sage Lady in Mays Landing next week on Thursday from 9 to 1. So if you want a half-hour in-person reading with me, you can schedule that also. It's all right on my page. And if you want to know where this is all happening in your own chart, your own Plutonic process, where the eclipses happened this time around, if you're feeling that really intensely, we can dive deeply into that. I offer payment plans. I know times are tough right now for everybody, so that offer is always there if you need it. And I'm also, I think, gonna make a service called the Plutonic Process that will kind of go along with what we're doing in this season, and I'll be putting that together soon and offering that as a reading service, kind of a package, like a longer term way for us to work together soon, especially all you Pluto and Scorpio generation listeners out there. You are now just starting to go through your Pluto square if you were born on the earlier side, like in the mid 80s. So important for you, especially going into your Pluto square, knowing where it's happening. If I knew that at the time, I would have been much more grateful, and maybe had a little bit more grace with the whole experience had I known beforehand what was happening. So just hints as to how to make the process more, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, but to go into it with more knowledge and ways to just know what's coming, because the Pluto square is really difficult. It's a I'll link to that episode as well, so you can kind of hear about my own personal experience if you haven't listened to that episode already from season 1. So till next time, everyone, thank you so much, and remember to be a maverick. Bye.